Albert Lee Seed is proud to support the Back to the Roots podcast. Like you, they value the one-on-one conversations with farmers and other agricultural professionals that you hear on this show. Albert Lee Seed helps organic and transitional farms with a full line of organic and non-GMO farm seed for corn, soybeans, forage and pasture, cover crops, and cereal grains. Check them out at alseed.com. That's alseed.com.
You're listening to Back to the Roots podcast. I'm Mike Klein, and along with Brian Wood, we are in Newcastle, Kentucky today at the Berry Center. And sitting down with us is the executive director and founder of the Berry Center, Mary Berry. So, Mary, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here where I work every day with you.
Well, thank you. Can you just give us a little bit of background on how the idea of the Berry Center came about?
In around 2010, it became clear to me that after something like 40 years of a local food movement, that the place I love the most was going down rapidly. And so I began to think about what was going on and what hadn't happened that needed to have happened. While I was thinking about all of those things, I was also appointed to the Farm Service Agency State Board in Kentucky. I was an Obama appointee, but I don't think he knew that he appointed me. I'm not sure who did, but anyway, so I said yes to that, mostly because I wanted to learn. I didn't know anything about a big USDA program. I had no experience. So I was, as I said, appointed to that state board. At the same time, I was elected onto a small grassroots organization that has a really good record in the state of Kentucky for working for farmers. But what I discovered on both of those boards, or I was able to compare, was or maybe I should say the similarity between the two boards was that neither board knew anything about the history of agriculture in Kentucky. It was as if, for instance, the tobacco program that maybe we'll talk about later, that my family was involved in for many years, and what Organic Valley, part of what Organic Valley is based on, a co-op, had been entirely forgotten. It had gone on in this state for over 60 years. It was the reason at that time that we were still dotted with small farms. The program ended in 2004, and the falling apart, the coming apart here was really exacerbated after the end of that program. So I began to think about that. I mean, why don't we have a remembered past? So I went to my father in the camp where he writes, and I said, Daddy, in spite of our efforts and all the things that going back several generations our family has been involved with, we are losing farmland and farmers faster in Kentucky than we ever have. We need to work on education for small farmers. We need to work on access to capital. The history of the Burley Tobacco Program needs to be studied, not forgotten. I think I had several more things on that list. And he said, well, it sounds like you might be starting a center. And I said, maybe I'm starting a center. I had really not thought that was what I was going to do. I think maybe I thought he should do more. I was farming full-time at that time, and had taken part in the local food movement for years, many years, and am grateful for it. I mean, it allowed us to make farm payments. When tobacco ended, it allowed us to continue to farm. But it wasn't changing the culture of agriculture. And the culture of agriculture needs to change, just as the culture of the country that we're living in needs to change. So once he said, it looks like you're starting a center, I went to work at starting a center. And with some help from some good friends, in 2011, we started the Berry Center. The things that I didn't know about running a nonprofit, that list is a lot longer than the things I knew about running a nonprofit. So this has been a huge learning experience for me. But one of the things that I believe to be true in this world is that if you make a commitment and set an intention, that the help you need comes. And I've always believed that. I mean, I grew up in a community that worked together and went to church together and loved each other. I understood that help came. I'd seen that happen, but this has been an extraordinary experience. I mean, a dear friend of mine has been with me since the Berry Center started. She retired one day as a school librarian and went to work basically the next day archiving the papers of my family. That speaks to a remembered history. Mm-hmm. The papers of my uncle and my grandfather who devoted their working lives to the Burley Co-op. And other people. Leah Baynes, who runs the Wendell Berry farming program of Sterling College. I've known her now since 2012. I'm working with people every day who have devoted themselves to this vision we have of a restored landscape, of Louisville being made healthier and safer because it's surrounded by a healthy countryside. I mean, that is a compelling vision to me. Mm-hmm. But I don't think I don't know that I would have ever expected to have people come to work here and not make much money and work every day to solve the problems that present themselves with our home place meat, with the farming program, with the archives at the Berry Center, and with the bookstore and cultural center, which is a reading program for which holds every year a reading program for our community and other things. So mm-hmm. I think the story of the center is akin to the story of my father's writing career. Daddy has been trying to figure out what has happened here for 60 plus years. And he's done a darn good job of it. Mm-hmm. I think I farmed for a living. I thought that was enough, and that's what I would do for the rest of my life. I some days wish it was. Farming, at least you got done with something occasionally. The tobacco was in the barn. The cows mm-hmm. were milked, and the chickens were dead. So, this nonprofit work is somewhat different. Mm-hmm. But I think that I started the nonprofit because I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand to see what I love falling apart and not take some active role in trying to hold on to what we still have and try to strengthen it.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you say falling apart, you're talking of small towns and communities mm-hmm. that are, we hear the word brain drain or losing resources. Mm-hmm. That's what you're referring to as well.
That is what I'm referring to. There's not a small town in Henry County, Kentucky that's not dead or dying. Henry County is the county that Newcastle is where we are. Newcastle is the county seat of Henry County. Barns are falling down. Fences were either removed for corn and soybeans or are gone. I did a search for a farm about a year ago, actually, for the farming program. And even living here all my life, I was amazed to find myself in field after field of degraded, eroded, dead, just dead places. Yeah. So yes, everything. Well, it is the little towns are dying. We do lose people. We are a bedroom community for Frankfurt and Louisville, so we've held on to it's a pretty steady population. But people don't live here anymore. They sleep here. They don't shop here. They don't take part in the life of the community. But what I have found really distressing is a loss of a common language, of common experience that I think I didn't know we had it until we began to lose it. And that language was an agricultural language. This was an agricultural county. Everyone raised tobacco here. So, for instance, the church that I went to for 25 years, after the end of the tobacco program, fell completely apart. And I think it fell apart mostly due to the loss of the understanding that a shared experience brings. We were all setting tobacco at the same time. We were all cutting tobacco at the same time. So differences between us that were always there. I've lived here all my life. I know what those differences were. Political differences, social differences, educational differences. Those things that had not mattered began to matter absolutely because people didn't have the common experience to pull them together. They didn't have anything to talk about anymore.
So then you talked about these things you disagreed with one another.
Yes.
Because you didn't have that...
Or didn't talk at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So people were... Mm-hmm. So first of all, people were unsettled and scared. And suddenly, what was happening across the country, the polarization about gay rights issues and, as I said, political differences became what shouldn't matter that much in terms of community life. Became the most important.
The new community, sort of. They lost the common language, so started looking for
right.
The next
That's
community.
Exactly right. They became, I was going to say tribal. You may need to take that out. But, it became, mm-hmm. it's what's happened to our country. Mm-hmm. And I've grieved over that a good deal and wondered about it. And I do think in our efforts to strengthen what's still good here, what we still have here, that is maybe the most difficult part of it, mm-hmm. is to try to pull, and that's really what we're doing here, is try to pull people back together to talk about their shared history, to talk about what we all care about.
Can you talk about that history and what you've learned about the Burley Tobacco Co-op and how it kind of brought people together?
Well, I think first and foremost, it took people out, took farmers out of competitive economy and put them, and they were in an economy of cooperation. They needed each other. We all needed each other. And I think that's very important. I think that's the problem with where we are right now in our agriculture. We either have entrepreneurial agriculture or we have large industrial agriculture and very little in the middle. That's why I think examples like Organic Valley are so important, and why I think it's so important to remember the history of the Burley Tobacco Program. My grandfather, John Berry Sr., my father's father, remembered his father going to sell his 1908, I believe, tobacco crop. Daddy writes about this in an essay. It's the Jefferson lecture that he gave in 2012, I think. He talks about the family sitting around, talking about what they might do with the money that was left over after the bills were paid, enjoying the talk. This is my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather came home without a penny for a year's work after he had paid the warehouse fees. That began after many generations of farming, of our family farming here, that began, I think, our public life. My grandfather would tell me and his other grandchildren when he was old and we were young, I thought then, if I can do something about this, I will. He would tell stories of men leaving warehouses with tears running down their faces. And that was because of the Duke Tobacco Trust. They owned, there were many growers, one or a handful of buyers. They have all the power. So for once and for a while, the Burley program begun in the 20s, but actually it was dormant when my grandfather and his friends and allies began to work for a program that would work for small farmers. The fact is that I believe it is a fact that the Burley Tobacco Growers Cooperative was the only government program that worked its entire life on behalf of the people it was supposed to work for. Of course, it couldn't survive, finally, and that's a long story. It couldn't survive global market pressure. It couldn't survive politicians who worship the free market. It was a Depression-era program, so it came in, it came to life at a time when people were ready and for that kind of help and understood the reason for it. And of course, the program worked really well for generations who remembered getting nothing for a year's work. When those people began to die away, some people began to agitate for freedom. And of course, there's almost no tobacco left in Kentucky now. But maybe I should say a word about how the program worked. Yeah. The program supported a kind of farming that fit the marginal farms in Henry County. We've got a rolling landscape, but not just Henry County. The 8-state Burley Belt, Kentucky was one of the states involved in the Burley program. Every farm had a quota. The quota was based originally on history of tobacco production on the farm. And so the quota would fluctuate from year to year, not in a ruinous way, but it would fluctuate some to respond to the needs of the market, which were set before the growing season every year. Farmers were paid a parity price. My grandfather said that parity was the sweetest idea that had ever entered the minds of politicians in this country. The idea that farmers should make. My grandfather compared it to a minimum wage, a 40-hour work week, and it worked. It supported a highly diversified farm economy. I bought at 22 a 200-acre farm. It had a 5-acre tobacco base, meaning we could plow only the least erodible, flattest land. So there'd be half an acre here, half an acre there. And then around that was permanent pasture, perennial agriculture. We had a dairy. We had a huge subsistence garden and agriculture going on. And as the years went by, we added to that. But the tobacco was the backbone of all of it was the backbone of our economic year. It also meant that young people could go into a local bank right here and say, this is my economic situation. I want to buy this farm. The question that was asked to us was, what's the tobacco base?
And you could never buy more base, or
you could lease.
You could lease the base from somebody else who had it?
Yes, and as far as I'm concerned, that began to weaken the program. Farmers then became tobacco specialists instead of diversified farmers. I think, and especially cross-county leasing. Now, later on, you could sell off tobacco base, but that was later, more toward the end of the program. So I think my grandfather was a lawyer and a farmer. My grandfather was the legal counsel and president of the board for a long time. My grandfather was always ready to go to Washington if the program needed to be defended, fought for. He watched it every day. He also practiced law a block from here.
Okay.
I think pointing when you're being recorded is a mistake, isn't it?
No, I saw you point and it made sense to me.
Then my Uncle John, my father's brother, took over they worked together for a while, and then he took over as legal counsel, and he was president of the board for a while. So we have their papers here, and we have used the principles of the program to start our meat program that's called Our Home Place Meat, named for the farm where my grandfather was born, and the story I told about my great-grandfather took place.
Okay. How is the meat co-op going?
It's going well, and it is not a co-op yet.
Oh, okay.
We are working toward being a co-op. But it's going well. COVID has been we had to, as everyone says now, we had to pivot some because we were a restaurant. We were serving a restaurant clientele. We've been able to, and we've kept going, and I'm very pleased with the program. But back to the issue of language that I talked about earlier, a common language. When we first started talking to farmers about this program, and I know you both have probably spoken to rooms full of farmers, they are the hardest audience as far as I'm concerned, because at least around here they can be dead silent. Just sort of waiting to see what you got, which is how it started. And so I would just blather away. The last couple of years, we've had our farmer meetings, and we'd have to quiet them because they're talking about the needs of the program, the genetics we need to get the cattle to weight more quickly, the forage health. I mean, they're so interested and engaged, and we are working toward a co-op. So we asked at our last meeting for farmers to volunteer to be on a committee to help us work on bringing new farmers on. We have a core group of 11. We'd like to, I don't know if we'll be able to do it this year because of COVID, but we were intending to, and we will add farmers at some point. How are we going to do that? And people volunteered to do that. I was just I'm so pleased to see what I remember happening again. Farmers talking to each other, excited, interested, thinking.
Mm-hmm. And I think because Brian and I have obviously worked with farmers, but when you get farmers together in a group, the really important stuff is not what I'm there to talk to them about. The really important stuff is what they're talking to each other about.
I absolutely agree.
Especially in small-scale agriculture, nobody's hanging on to trade secrets. If something really works on one farm, he wants to tell another farmer. It's not like they want to have that niche in the market for themselves. And I think you see that especially in organic agriculture and in smaller co-ops. You see that.
It's wonderful that you see that, and I'm so glad that you do. It's worried me One of the things that worried me and led to the start of the center and then the start of the meat co-op was that some of our young farmers, who I think are doing pretty well out here in organic agriculture with CSAs and farm markets and so on, they are friendly with each other, but they are also in direct competition. And if every farmer in Henry County decided to have a CSA and go to markets, 3/4 of them would go broke. Mm-hmm. So what I see as a failing of the local food movement is that we haven't moved past entrepreneurial to put what the Berry Center is right now for our home place meat is an entity to move product, to market product, to deal with the problems. All that we deal with the problems. We expect the farmers to adhere to our guidelines and our rules and deliver the product that we need. Mm-hmm. We do the rest. And that's what the Burley Co-op did. That's what farmers need, I think.
I want to step back because when I said farmers aren't competitive, with each other, but the direct marketing is a completely different setup. Because when you look at the farmers within Organic Valley, they're not competing for shelf space with anybody else. If they were all going direct, like you were saying, then it is competition. But if you can get that group of farmers together and form a small co-op, right, now you're all working for the common good, and you take that competition and that rivalry out of the equation.
Right. That's right.
But I love the story about you, how they're now constantly talking. You brought the language back.
Well, they had it. They just needed to... they needed a place to let it out, I think. And when I started the Berry Center, I didn't know that I was doing this, but I think I've done 2 or 3 smart things in my life, maybe 4. But anyway, but I think I started with an inventory. In fact, I know I did, because another thing I thought the local food movement was missing was working with local culture, what's already here, and not what you wish was here. Not what satisfies covers of magazines and chefs, but what's really here. And so we have some very good farmers here. We have some really good livestock producers here. We have a well-watered, still somewhat fertile landscape. Mm-hmm. We have proximity to markets. And so on. But one of the things we still have are the remnants of a cohesive agricultural community. And I think what we've done is just give these young farmers, and mostly they're pretty young, they're under 40, a place to talk about what they want to talk about.
And you've given them hope.
I think so, and I hope so. I know that the woman who cuts my father's hair is married to one of the farmers in our program, and he told Daddy that he's staying in farming because of this program. And it's not because we have replaced an income. We've improved income, but it's because of the hope, mm-hmm, I think, that this program represents.
Well, it's hope through steadiness, I guess, is probably right, where it's coming from. Because just watching in the communities that I work in, when you have that competition and low prices, that's what leads to farmers shutting down and not wanting to share what their cutting edge is, their key to profitability or whatever it is. But then once you move into, say, in our world, it's the organic market or a beef market where it's growing fast, that can provide good prices. But then in the meantime, what you're doing right now and what we're going through in the organic milk industry is there's got to be structure put into place, because there's no worse enemy to a farmer than himself. Because
You're right. Times are bad, they produce more.
Yep.
Times are good, they produce more.
Yep.
And Organic Valley has a quota system in place for the milk. It's similar to what the Burley tobacco was. And while the last couple of years have been painful for farmers because of the quota, it's better than not having any.
Absolutely.
And it's really going to help us going forward.
Well, under the tobacco program, farmers understood that they were trading in their right to gamble for a steady income. And I had a meeting with George Seaman, the founder of Organic Valley, 4 years ago or so.
Okay.
And enjoyed it. We went there because Daddy spoke to, probably you know this better than I do, the 25th anniversary maybe?
I think the 25th anniversary of the annual meeting.
Yeah. And at that meeting, he discovered that George had known about the tobacco program and had used it as a model. And we were, well, this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, actually. We knew we were going to do meat, and we just wanted to talk to George and other people at Organic Valley. And he told me at that meeting that the Amish suppliers are content and happy with the money. That the English farmers, you probably want to take this out.
No, we definitely don't want
The English producers are always agitating for more. And that happened to the tobacco program. People, and with tobacco, maybe a bigger problem than milk, is that it's a high dollar crop. So they were seeing, large amounts of money moving around. So anyway, that's off the subject really, but yeah, that's the cultural change that's got to take place. I mean, I really, there's a lot I worry about in the middle of the night. One of the things I worry about in the middle of the night is that Parity has been such an inspirational thought to me, to my father, to my grandfather. But what does Parity mean when a pickup truck costs $75,000? Parity meant something to people who could do for themselves, could fix anything, could reuse anything, and didn't expect to live like middle-class Americans with paid vacations and so on. So,
but I think a lot of that also comes with no longer having that sense of community. And when you look at the Amish people being a part of a co-op, okay, their whole lifestyle is cooperative. The church is, right. All the pastors, that's an unpaid position for life. So they work together. So the cooperative spirit is there. Right. So it's a perfect fit in that system.
It is their culture.
It is their culture. And once you lose the community culture, then becomes individualism. And then is where I think maybe I want to gamble on my tobacco instead of being guaranteed this price, because if I hit it right, I can buy that truck.
Well, I would like to have, our hope is that we have a culture of people that you speak of. I would like to have a fair price for what I sell and to live a decent life and a contented life on this property. And I would like my neighbor to also. Mm-hmm. And of course, everything that every screen, every periodical is screaming at us to feel another way, to self-actualize. I don't even know what that means, but I hear that term a lot. I don't think it's good.
Yeah, I don't think so. But I think it's so encouraging that what you're doing here at the Berry Center, because tobacco is a thing of the past here, But
There's
now
still some, very little, and people are not making money on it.
Mm-hmm. But now you can take another commodity and use the same style of program, but use it with something that, like with what you're doing with the beef. And I think right now the small family farm, the small diversified family farm, needs to hear that there's hope.
Oh, I do too.
Because it's tough. Because when you look at, how great would life be if you could milk 20 cows, have 5 pigs and 25 chickens, and make a great living. Like, that'd be wonderful. But you can't anymore. But I think you're seeing more and more of that diversity coming back, even to, like, my family. A lot of them are starting to raise some pigs again. There is that diversity coming back. So this is so encouraging.
Well, I'm glad you think so. That means a lot to me. We have another program here. We have 4 programs here. Our education program is called the Wendell Berry Farming Program, and it's in partnership with Sterling College. It's in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. But the farming program exists on the ground in Henry County. The students are here. But I couldn't, in good conscience, encourage these young people to farm if I wasn't at the same time working on something that will support their efforts to farm. So, yeah, it all works together here to keep me up at night.
So how many students do you have?
We have 12. We've started with a cohort that we're creating a school here, so we had a lot to work out. We had students here for 2 short courses, 2 years before the program started, and the first cohort came to Henry County to stay a year ago, about exactly. The wonderful thing that's happened, the first cohort is made up 12 students. You'd think I could come up with this number easier, but at least half of the students, more than half of the students, are from Kentucky, and 4 of them live in Henry County.
Oh, no kidding.
So this is completely delightful to me. This is more than I could have hoped for. We wanted Kentucky students. My idea when we started the program in 2012, with another school that went bankrupt, not our fault. We were doing fine. But my hope was to get a hold of the young people who have the passion for farming and who have access to land, and to turn them a little bit toward the kind of agriculture that we're hoping for, and to teach them not just entrepreneurial agriculture, but farming in the middle. The agricultural programs I'd looked at around the country, thinking we would find something. Of course, I didn't want to be outside of Kentucky, but I looked at all kinds of programs, and I just didn't see any of them that were what we wanted to do. And so we needed to partner with Sterling is the right partner. It's a tiny school. Probably couldn't do this at anything but a tiny school. As Daddy said, if we tried to do this with the University of Kentucky, it would be like turning a battleship in the Kentucky River. You just can't do it. So we needed to be able to move and do what we think we should do, and then we've had their support. We have a wonderful faculty, 3 people who have moved to Henry County to teach and farm. One of them's farming. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
Was that last year when I came down with Dad and spoke to the students? That was exciting, because here were young people fired up about being farmers. Mm-hmm.
They hadn't been here long, I don't think. You all weren't here in the fall, weren't you? Or when? I don't know. But anyway, sure. Yes, it was the first cohort of students. We will add another cohort next fall. So we will have, yes, our intention is to finally have 48 to 50 students here, but I may be dead before that happens. I'm for it, but we have to do that slowly. So
that's really, really interesting, because you do work a lot with horses too, right?
Yes. We have draft horses on the farm. The Berry Center has bought a farm for the program, and also for our home place meet to do work with genetics. All of this comes together with the work of the students. The students are working on, I'm not a professor. I don't know how to talk about these things, but they're going to work with different breeds, and I think we're going to add sheep to the program at some point. We already have a flock of sheep out there. They're going to work on pasture health and management, and all of this will be accessible to all our farmers. And so it's exciting.
And you said you have 11 farmers now in the program?
We do. We do.
And how many, how big are their herds?
Well, I can tell you that the average cattle herd in Kentucky is 26 mother cows. Okay. So it's pretty small. And some of our farmers are right around there. A couple of them have maybe up to 40 or so. Okay. But it's small.
And your markets would be, you said it was mostly in the restaurant business. Is it still there, or because of the shutdown, did you sell more for people that wanted to put it in their freezer?
We do sell to individuals, and we have, I don't know that we've sold more. What we have done is supply a community kitchen in Louisville with a lot of meat. And the wonderful, this initiative is called the Leah Initiative. And a chef from Louisville who's been on television and doing something, I'm not sure what, but he wanted to start a kitchen for his community to feed people, but he wanted good food and he wanted to pay fair prices for it. You all probably can imagine or you probably know how rare that is. So that has made a huge difference. We've also opened a little store right next door to where we're sitting, and that's getting some traffic. We're still selling to restaurants. It's just, we were kind of really going up, and then, but so far so good.
So is there hope to branch into more than just the meat side? Are you hoping to, so that co-op would offer produce or anything else, or is it just going to stay with the meat?
I believe, as my grandfather believed, that the principles of the Burley Tobacco Program would work for anything farmers could produce. So I would love to think that at some point, maybe we're not doing it, but somebody is. I mean, I'd like to see some kind of, I'd like to see this kind of work around sustainable forestry. I'd like to see it everywhere. So I think we will add, I think we'll stick with meat for a while. That's where our farmers are. They're comfortable with it. We have some really good vegetable producers in Henry County that are supplying, as I said, CSAs and farm markets. They've had to pivot. Probably right now, there's a farmer in our parking lot back here who is a member of our home place meat, but also a vegetable producer. People come here to pick up either their share or whatever they've bought. These young people are doing a great job, and at this point, I'm pretty determined to stay out of the way of that. But I think meat, we've worked really hard to figure this out, and I think we'll stick to this for a while.
Well, what you're doing is basically creating a model that can be replicated in other communities.
That's exactly right. Thank you. That was very well put. I should have said that a long time ago. Yes, we absolutely feel that this is replicable, and we are absolutely willing to talk to people, as we are doing, about what we've done. Now, we don't have enough years under our belt to say, we're not Organic Valley. We can't say, well, yes, this works. Yeah, we can say, this has worked. So far, this works.
Well, you're going through the learning curve so others don't have to make some of the same mistakes.
Wouldn't that be good?
Even though they still will.
That's another thing about the local food movement, that we don't seem to have any history. The local food movement doesn't have... I don't know why that is. It's when you need information about selling to school systems or doing whatever you want to do, there's no history. It's hard to find help. I wonder sometimes if that's not because of the entrepreneurial nature of this. It seems to me that with some people, the goal of the entrepreneurial endeavor is to get big and sell out. And that wipes away the history. That really is just a guess on my part. I have no idea. But I think after 40 years or so of a local food movement, we ought to have more history that tells us what we need to know. But we just don't.
There needs to be more cooperation, however you want to put it, so that there isn't that battle of competition that holds back that revealing of what was successful to create the history. That seems to be the case in the local food movement. It's awesome to see from the outside, but I'm sure as an insider, it's pretty cutthroat, I think.
Well, I think that it can be. I certainly remember my years at farm markets. I got along pretty well with people, but they were the most contentious places I've ever been. There were people at each other's throats all the time I felt bad for them and for all of us, because it's market share. How much market share, how much is there? Nobody knows. So in Louisville and Lexington, I think a couple of big CSAs have pretty much cornered the market and made it hard for people out here. But my husband started the first CSA in Kentucky in 1990 and ran it till 2005. And he had a 100-person waiting list the entire time he ran it. He gave his list and his help to a young farmer here, and that young farmer is still running a CSA, but he's having a lot of trouble selling as many subscriptions as he'd like to sell, because he's in direct competition with Kroger that has cheap organic in it, 23 farm markets in Louisville, something like that. He's in competition with everybody. Oh. So,
I read an article where in some cities the farmers markets are actually owned by the grocery stores, and there's nothing local or anything with the farmers market, because two things people think of a farmers market: they think local, and they also think healthy.
They think organic.
And organic.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, neither one's the case. But, from a business perspective, that grocery store is brilliant by doing the farmer's market. Oh, yeah. But it's disgusting, in my opinion, because here you have the small farmers that survive because of that, and now you can't let him have that piece of the pie?
You're speaking from a set of values that you don't share with the people that own the grocery store.
Yeah.
I have the most simple-minded questions about what's happened in this country. When I read about the history of the tobacco program, it was fought from the outset by the companies, by the tobacco companies. They did not want to pay farmers a fair price. This is not a surprise. But I think, why couldn't they let farmers have the fair price? There was 6 cents of tobacco in a pack of cigarettes. It didn't make any difference to them. So what you're speaking of is just the values that this country has run on, and we don't know it. Mm-hmm. We don't acknowledge it, and so we're losing it.
Mm-hmm. But then when you see people lose their values because they need to get even or whatever in the same marketplace, like, you can't lose your values. You've got to stick with your values, and something hopefully will work out. And like the farming program that you have here, there's more and more opportunity coming, I think, for the small farm.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think it could certainly go that way. Mm-hmm. I don't know what in heaven's name Homeland Security means to this country if it doesn't mean a local supply of what people have to survive. But even under COVID, have we heard any leadership talking that way? No.
I think if we want to be desperate to find a bright spot in COVID, it is people are asking more questions about where their food is coming from. Is it healthy? You're seeing that being talked about. So I think that could be a bright spot in agriculture. Because people they're cooking more at home, they're trying to eat healthier, but that's a really small percentage of the people, and you don't hear from them.
I agree with you that is the hope, and that is a bright spot. I'm somewhat older than you are, and I can tell you that this has happened before. We have something that scares the hell out of people, and they begin to question the way it is. Unfortunately, it seems that I don't know how long a disaster has to go on before people hold on to the memory. My hope is that what we're all doing, what you all are doing, what we're doing here, what the Land Institute's doing, what other organizations around the country that are trying to do something about the way it is now, is that we're coming up under what's coming apart, and with something solid. And so when, I don't like to speak apocalyptically, but some changes are going on now, and more are coming. So we'll have something to fall back on. Something will be here. We will have established, now I'm going to speak of dreams. We will have established a co-op here that's supporting farmers that are supplying enough meat to our urban neighbors, or even our small town neighbors. Maybe that's, it's here. I think that's all we can hope for, and I think mostly we just have to not think much about the future and do what we need to do right now.
Think too much about the future, you're going to lose your mind.
Well, we don't know what's going to happen. We just don't. I mean, we have all the experts telling us all kinds of things. Clearly, for instance, the climate is changing. There's no doubt. And clearly, something needs to be done. But people seem to have been convinced that something needs to be done by somebody else, that we need some technological fix, or we need something that's not going to change the way we all live. This is not true. We've all got to change. We've got to do what we need to do right now, today, and not wait. As my husband says, the cavalry ain't coming. We've got to do what we need to do right now for the places and the people that we care about. Mm-hmm. And stop moving around all the time. That'd be good too.
Yeah. Well, Mary, I want to thank you so much. And before we go, berrycenter.org is the website. It's a really beautiful website. I would encourage people that are listening to go to the website, support the Berry Center, because I think what you're doing here is really encouraging and really exciting stuff. So
thank you.
I really want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with us. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
I thoroughly enjoyed it myself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to another episode of Back to the Roots podcast, brought to you by Albert Lee C.